Everyone thought it was a perfect match, almost too perfect. Daniel Reeves, 32 years old, was a well-respected police officer in Phoenix, Arizona. He had a strong jawline, an athletic build, and the kind of calm confidence that made people feel safe. Stephanie Parker, 28, was the opposite in many ways, gentle, soft-spoken, and kind. She worked as a kindergarten teacher and loved sunsets, poetry, and the ocean. Friends said they balanced each other out, that Daniel was her protector and Stephanie was his peace. Their courtship had been short but intense. Within 6 months of meeting, they were engaged. Just 8 months later, they were married in a beautiful garden ceremony surrounded by friends and family. From the outside, everything looked ideal. They held hands during the vows. Stephanie smiled with her eyes. Daniel even teared up when she walked down the aisle. After the ceremony, they posted pictures of their rings and kissed under fairy lights as guests cheered. They had planned a honeymoon in Bora, a destination Stephanie had dreamed about since she was a teenager. It was her idea of paradise: white sand, turquoise water, and bungalows over the sea. Daniel agreed, booking one of the most luxurious resorts on the island. They were to spend 10 days there, disconnected from the world, living in a tropical fantasy. Their Instagram was full of moments that looked like joy. Sunset dinners, cocktails with flower garnishes, snorkeling videos, and selfies with the ocean stretching behind them. But the truth is, pictures can lie. Stephanie's smile, if you looked closely, didn't always reach her eyes. She started posting less by the 3rd day. Daniel didn't tag her in his photos anymore. And then, suddenly, there were no posts at all. Back at the resort, some of the staff noticed tension. It started small. A sharp exchange over dinner, Stephanie leaving the table early, Daniel staying behind, finishing his drink in silence. Housekeeping found signs of disarray in their bungalow: broken glass in the bathroom, makeup scattered across the floor. One maid later reported hearing shouting from their room, but when she knocked to check, no one answered. On the 4th night, things took a darker turn. Room service was ordered around 8 p.m. but never touched. The tray remained outside the bungalow, ignored. A neighboring guest recalled hearing a loud thud and then what sounded like muffled crying. No one thought much of it. After all, couples argue, it was late. Maybe someone had slipped or gotten seasick. But the next morning, when the sun rose over the calm waters of Bora, Stephanie's body was discovered. She was floating just beneath the bungalow, her hair fanned out like seaweed, her skin pale and still. A resort employee spotted her while cleaning the dock. At first, they thought it was a swimmer. But as they got closer, the horror became clear. Her body was bruised, her head injured. She wasn't breathing. Daniel was the one who called for help, his voice flat and strangely composed. He claimed she had gone out to watch the stars and must have slipped. Authorities arrived quickly, and so did the questions. Why hadn't he reported her missing earlier? Why didn't he hear her fall? Why were there fresh bruises on her arms, her neck, and a broken blood vessel in her eye? Stephanie Parker had been a newlywed, a teacher, and a daughter. She had been in love, full of dreams, and excited about her future. And now she was dead, just 4 days into her honeymoon. In a place built for love and beauty, something evil had happened. And the man who promised to protect her was suddenly at the center of a horrifying mystery. Daniel Reeves stood on the deck of the bungalow as officers arrived. He was shirtless, wearing only swim trunks, and appeared calm, too calm for a man who had just lost his wife. His tone was controlled, his answers precise. He told the resort security that Stephanie had gone out late at night to look at the stars and must have slipped off the deck into the water. He claimed he had fallen asleep and hadn't noticed she was missing until morning. It sounded plausible. At first, the body was retrieved and taken to the local medical center for examination. The initial assumption was accidental drowning. But when the coroner began to examine her more closely, The story started to unravel. Stephanie had deep bruising around her jaw and cheekbones. There were marks on her wrists that looked like someone had grabbed her. And there was a large, fatal injury to the side of her head. It wasn't the kind of injury someone gets from falling gently into water. It was blunt force trauma, severe enough to fracture her skull. Something wasn't right. Police investigators returned to the bungalow to search for clues. The scene was not what they expected. Inside the luxurious room, things were oddly out of place. A glass was shattered near the bed. One of the lounge chairs had been knocked over. There were damp towels piled in the corner, 2 of them stained with something dark. When the floor was checked with forensic tools, faint traces of blood were found near the entrance to the deck, partially wiped up. It was clear there had been a struggle. Daniel insisted it had been a tragic accident. He repeated his version of events several times, never changing a word, but there were holes in his story. The resort's security cameras captured movement from their bungalow late that night. At around 2:20 a.m., Daniel was seen dragging what appeared to be a heavy object wrapped in towels across the deck. He paused, looked around, and then disappeared from view. About 10 minutes later, he reappeared alone, wet from the waist down. The footage didn't show Stephanie at all. After dinner that evening, an investigation into the couple's relationship began back in Phoenix. Friends and family were contacted. Stephanie's best friend revealed that she had confided in her shortly before the wedding. She said she was nervous about Daniel's temper, that he could be cold and angry behind closed doors. Another friend said Stephanie once showed up with bruises on her arm, but brushed it off, saying she bumped into a door. It was starting to look like this marriage, so beautiful on the surface, had been hiding something dark underneath. Phone records were also pulled. Investigators found messages that had been deleted from Daniel's device, but not from Stephanie's cloud backup. On the night of her death, she had texted a friend, saying she and Daniel had argued and that she was thinking of ending the trip early. The message was never answered. She died just hours later. The final piece of the puzzle came from the autopsy report. Stephanie had not drowned. Water was found in her lungs, but it was shallow water. The fatal injury came first. She had been alive when she hit the water, but unconscious and bleeding. She had no chance to survive. Daniel's image as the grieving husband began to crumble. He had lied about the timeline, ignored the blood evidence, and offered no believable explanation for the bruises. As investigators put the pieces together, it became clearer. This was no accident. This was a murder, planned or not, committed by the very man who had vowed to love and protect her. The honeymoon was a lie, and the paradise of Bora had turned into the scene of an unspeakable crime. Asterisk. Back in the United States, news of Stephanie Parker's death spread rapidly. At first, the story was framed as a tragic accident during a honeymoon in paradise. But as more information came to light, the narrative began to shift. Media outlets picked up on the inconsistencies, and soon the headlines were darker. Newlywed dies mysteriously in Bora. Police officer's wife found dead, foul play suspected. Daniel Reeves returned to Phoenix before local authorities in Bora completed their investigation. He didn't attend Stephanie's memorial. He told reporters he was too devastated. But many found his absence suspicious, especially given that no formal charges had been filed at that point. Behind the scenes, however, law enforcement was building a case. It wasn't just the physical evidence that painted a disturbing picture. It was Daniel's entire history. His past relationships came under review. 2 ex-girlfriends agreed to speak with investigators. One described Daniel as deeply controlling, saying he often monitored her phone and accused her of cheating without reason. She admitted to filing a restraining order in 2017 after he punched a hole in her apartment wall during an argument. The order was later dropped under pressure, but she said the fear never left her. Another woman claimed that Daniel isolated her from friends, and tracked her location without permission. She said he had a way of smiling in public and manipulating people into trusting him, while being a different person entirely behind closed doors. Even within the Phoenix Police Department, there were whispers. Some colleagues called Daniel intense and always on edge. A fellow officer remembered an incident during a routine traffic stop where Daniel exploded in rage at a driver who simply questioned a citation. He had to be pulled aside and calmed down. Internal Affairs had once reviewed his behavior, but no official reprimands were issued. He remained in good standing on paper. Stephanie had never filed any complaints, but her friends painted a haunting picture. They said she became quieter in the months leading up to the wedding. She stopped going out as much, rarely responded to texts, and often made excuses for not meeting in person. Some assumed it was wedding stress. Others suspected something more serious. One colleague remembered Stephanie pulling her aside in the break room. She whispered that Daniel had become cold, and that sometimes he would shout for no reason. But she quickly changed the subject. Afraid someone might overhear. When police searched Daniel's home, they found more disturbing details. Stephanie's journals were neatly stacked in a box. In one entry, just 2 weeks before the wedding, she wrote that she wasn't sure she could go through with it. She said Daniel scared her when he drank and that he could be unrecognizable in his anger. Still, she wrote that she loved him and hoped things would change. She didn't want to disappoint her family or cancel everything after so much planning. That journal became a key piece of evidence in establishing a pattern of fear and control. Meanwhile, forensic analysts recovered data from Daniel's phone that he had tried to erase. It showed he had Googled how long it takes for a body to sink just days before the trip. He also visited forums discussing unsolved crimes and accidental deaths during travel. The digital trail was chilling. It became increasingly obvious that Daniel's life was built on a carefully maintained image. The uniform, the charm, the wedding photos, they all masked something far darker. Stephanie had likely seen pieces of it, but not all. Not until it was too late. She believed marriage might fix it. Instead, it sealed her fate. The man who took an oath to protect others had become the one she needed protection from. And no one saw it until it was too late. Asterisk, the investigation took a critical turn when detectives focused on the missing 30 minutes between the time Stephanie was last seen alive and when Daniel appeared on the resort surveillance camera, dragging something across the deck. That half hour became the heart of the case. According to forensic experts, Stephanie's time of death was estimated to be between 2 o'clock and 2:30 am. Yet, Daniel wasn't seen moving outside the bungalow until just after 2:45 am, leaving a chilling window of unaccounted time that investigators believed was used to clean up a crime. Inside the bungalow, crime scene analysts found fresh scratches on the wood flooring and the bedpost. They also discovered several wet towels hidden at the bottom of a laundry basket. 2 were soaked in blood. Further testing confirmed the blood matched Stephanie's DNA. Even more alarming, forensic luminol revealed smeared footprints around the room, consistent with a body being dragged from the bedroom area to the edge of the deck. Though some of the mess had been wiped down, it wasn't enough. The evidence clung to the wood, stubborn and silent. Stephanie's suitcase was still packed. Her phone, untouched since 9:37 p.m., had been tucked under the bed. And on the bathroom counter was a small notebook where she had written down a list of activities she wanted to do the next day: swimming, kayaking, a couple's massage. That list would never be completed. It was the quiet detail that broke many of the investigators. It spoke of someone who was alive and hopeful just hours before her violent end. But the most damning evidence came from the cloud. Although Daniel had deleted messages from his phone, he didn't realize that Stephanie's text history was backed up. When authorities retrieved it, they found a string of messages Stephanie had sent to her friend around midnight. In them, she said she and Daniel had a serious argument. She said he accused her of embarrassing him in front of the resort staff and called her a mistake. The final message read, "I'm scared of him right now. I don't know what he'll do." That message was sent at 12:18. She was dead less than 2 hours later. The resort staff also came forward. A cleaning crew member reported seeing Daniel pacing the deck barefoot at 3 a.m., smoking a cigarette and staring into the water. When she called out a polite greeting, he didn't respond. Another guest recalled hearing a loud thump followed by silence just after 2 a.m., but no one reported it. After all, this was a place where people came to relax, where no one imagined they'd hear murder unfolding. Even the local police in Bora, initially hesitant to challenge a foreign law enforcement officer, began to see the case with sharper eyes. They coordinated with U.S. authorities to review all evidence and issued an arrest warrant for Daniel Reeves. Once back in Phoenix, he was taken into custody quietly. There was no chase, no resistance, just Daniel sitting in his car outside his apartment when the handcuffs clicked into place. The arrest sent shockwaves through both communities. The people who once praised him now felt betrayed. His badge, his rank, and his reputation were no longer shields. They were symbols of how easy it was to hide behind power. Stephanie had been dismissed, her fear minimized. But now, her voice was being heard, piece by piece, through texts, notes, and evidence that told the story she never got to finish. The final 30 minutes of her life may never be fully known. But the silence Daniel counted on had been broken. The truth, though buried beneath calm waters and false smiles, had risen to the surface. And with it came justice. Asterisk, asterisk. The courtroom was packed as Daniel Reeves stood trial for the murder of his wife, Stephanie Parker. Rows of spectators filled the benches, some strangers drawn by the chilling nature of the case, others there in silent support of Stephanie's grieving family. At the front sat her parents, eyes hollow from months of sorrow, clinging to a single photo of their daughter in her wedding dress, the last image of her alive. The prosecution presented a clear and devastating narrative. They laid out the timeline, the digital evidence, the bruises, the surveillance footage, and Stephanie's final messages. They spoke of the missing 30 minutes, the bloodied towels, and the fake stories Daniel told in the aftermath. Each piece connected like a chain, linking together to form a picture of a man who had not lost control in a single moment, but someone who had built a life on control and finally snapped when he couldn't have it. Stephanie's journal entries were read aloud, her handwriting projected on a screen. The words spoke of fear, confusion, and hope that things might improve. She had wanted to believe that the man she married was still inside the angry, unpredictable person she often faced. But page after page revealed how that hope had faded. In the days before her death, the defense tried to argue that it was an accident, that Stephanie slipped, fell, and drowned. They claimed that Daniel's actions afterward were panicked and disorganized, not malicious. But the evidence was too heavy, the injuries too violent, the lies too many, and the intent too clear. A forensic expert testified that Stephanie's head injuries could only be caused by blunt force, not a fall into water. Another revealed the disturbing Google searches on Daniel's phone just days before the honeymoon. A resort employee pointed out Daniel's unusual behavior that night, his emotionless stare into the ocean, the blood on his leg, and how he never once asked where Stephanie was when help arrived. The trial lasted just over 2 weeks, but the jury took less than 5 hours to deliver their verdict. Guilty. Daniel Reeves was sentenced to 35 years in prison, without the possibility of parole. The courtroom remained silent as the sentence was read, but Stephanie's mother quietly sobbed, clutching the photo of her daughter. Justice had been served, but it brought no joy, only the cold comfort of accountability. Daniel didn't react. No anger, no tears. Just the same expressionless face that had become his mask throughout the entire ordeal. After the trial, Stephanie's family launched a foundation in her name to raise awareness about emotional abuse and coercive control. They spoke publicly for the first time, urging women not to ignore red flags, no matter how charming someone may seem in public. They told the world that Stephanie was more than a headline. She was a teacher who loved children, a daughter who sent birthday cards without fail, and a woman who had so much life left to live. Back in Bora, the bungalow where Stephanie died was quietly taken off the resort's listing. Some staff say it's being renovated, others whisper it will never be used again. Guests who stayed nearby claim they sometimes felt a strange heaviness in the air at night. One woman even reported hearing soft crying from the deck during a windless evening. The paradise Stephanie dreamed of had become a grave. What began as a celebration of love ended in horror. A man sworn to serve and protect had turned into a predator. And a woman who thought she was beginning her forever found only a final brutal end. No one saw it coming. But now no one can forget. ***.